Continuing previous lesson, next topic is static. The member variable, so far we have used only the non-static member variable. So if a variable is non-static, means that static word is not written, then it's non-static. So if the member variable is non-static, then the you can say the object has its own copy. So every object can have their own copy. So there are three objects and the non-static member variables that's their own copy. So each object can have their individual values. However, in case of static, the member variable declared as static belong to the entire class. So if it belongs to entire class, so we have only one memory location. It's created once. It's created once means that there is one memory location for the static variable. You can either access using the class or you can access using the objects, and anyone can update, and that the others will see the updated value and is shared by all instances. So if you created n objects, so all the n objects, that value is shared among all the object instances. So let's see first non-static variable. So we have a car, and this is constant, but it's non-static because we have not done static here. So it means it's got a non-static variable. So we have a model, but this is constant. So the constant means that its value, once initialized, its value will not be changed, right? So if the variable is non-static, constant, then either we can initialize it here using the base initialization or assignment, or we can initialize at the time of creation of the object, which using the initializer list. Because constant doesn't mean that it should be immediately known. It can be known during the run. It's not constant expression, so it's a constant. So its value may be known at the runtime. So at that time we can, at the time of creation of object, we can use the initializer list and we can give the value, but we can't use the assignment operator. So we can use initialization here using base or assignment, but or in the constructor using initializer list, right? So let's say that we have another variable now. It is a static and it's not constant, non-constant, but static. So if the variable is static, then it is shared among all the instances as well as it's a class variable. And since it's a class variable, we should not be assigning this value in the constructor. So we need to design outside this class, right? So it's not here also, to outside the class, so that it clearly indicates that this is a class variable. Now, we can have a variable which is static as well as constant. So if the variable is static as well as constant, then the only place that we initialize it here. When you say that this is static also and the constant also, means that you need to assign the value here only. Now, okay, so next, so we have now a model which is a constant. So it's a constant means that we can initialize in the initializer list, best, or can be here. If it's an instance count static, then it will go outside. Extra wheel is something which is a static also and a constant also, and we need to give the value here that the extra wheel is 1. And if there is something called constant expression you want to initialize, like the default wheels. So constant expression can only be static. You can't have a non-constant. So if it's because constant expression is something that the value is known at the compile time, not at the runtime when the objects are created. Its value must be known at the compile time. So this is more restrictive. So this can be only static. So when at the time of compile time, it must be the class variable. It can't be the object variable because object will be created during the runtime. So you need to use constant expression as a static variable and must be defined at the time of creation, at the time of right now. Right. Next, We can have a function like this one. Now we are defining the constructor. So car, we know that this model is a constant. Its value can be here or can be initializer list. Instance count is static. It must be given value here. And extra wheel is a static as well as constant. So we must know the value right now here. And if it's a constant expression then static, then also we must know the value here. Initializer list for non-static. So if you have a number of variable, then how do you initialize these variables in the constructor? Well, there's a mix of variable. So car is a constructor, and we have here this car accepts model in the constructor, and then it accepts the model. And now we are saying that this model is assigned to model in the uh, initializer list. So model is assigned this value, this is given to this, and extra wheel is assigned 1 immediately because extra wheel is static and constant. So we have already declared there, and our instance count we can change anytime. So initial static in right now here we are saying that instance count is increased as you created an object of the car. Instance count is increased, but we need to initialize first, and that initialization is here. Here we say int car instance count, and this value is 0. So we can create two objects. So when we created two objects, since its initial value is 0, so immediately when we created Tesla, so it will be increased by 1. And similarly, when we pass this Honda, so its value will be increased automatically because what we are doing is increase the instance count by 1. So this will become 2. And the default will, and you can access, because instance count is a static variable, you can either access using the car with scope resolution operator or using the object car1 dot and car2 dot. So if you are using the class, then we need to use this scope resolution operator, or if you are using the object, then this is the by the dot operator. Similarly, default wheels, and what's default wheels? Default wheels is a static variable, and default wheels is static, so we can either use using the car or the object, but the values, all these values will be shared. Now let me ask you a question. How would you declare the value of pi? So we know the pi is a constant, and how do we want to declare the value of pi? So this is one method where we say it's a float and we declare it as a constant, and its value is this one. So this is just very simple variable that we say that it's constant, its value can't be changed, and its value is this one. Second option is that we in the class, we were talking about in the class, actually it's somewhere written in the class, not outside. So the second method is that we say the pi is a constant and it's static also. Means that it is a non-static, means that every instance will have its own value of pi, which doesn't make any sense. So pi is a constant, so it must be the class variable. So we can say that constant is pi, so but the moment we declare it as a static, so we can't give the value here, so it must be outside the class. So we need to say outside the class example scope resolution pi, and then we give the value. So that's another method that we can declare pi as a static and then we give the value outside the class. The third is we can say that not constant but it's a static, because you don't need to do the it's a static. So we can just say static and this pi, and then we give the value pi. But this will indicate that it's a static and it's a static shared by all, but it's not constant. Means that the value can be changed, right? Or this is another method where we say that inside the class we are saying this is pi, its value is this, and this is constant expression, and it's a static. So now we are more restrictive. Making pi as a constant expression means that this value is known at the compile time, and then it's a static. Static means that its value is shared. So for if you want to define a constants, so this method is preferred, because It's compile time constant, and it also indicates that it is shared among all the instances of the objects, shared among all instances of class. Okay, so this is how you will declare the value of pi. So we have a class example. It's a public, you can say public, we need to say it public so that each object can also access and we can access through the class as well. Okay, and we don't need get set because its value anyway cannot be changed. So it's a pi and it's a constant expression. Its value must be known at the compile time and it's static in shared among all instances of the class. And then you can use this using the scope resolution operator of the class scope resolution and then the pi. There may be static methods also, not just a variable. So static member functions are instance independent and they belong similar to the variables. So if we have a function which is static, it means that is also independent of the objects. So they are instance independent. So they belong to the class. Static functions also belong to the class. So the basic principle is if it's a static, then it belongs to the class and is shared among all the instances of that class. So not any particular classes. So static members are defined within the class. And these are defined within the class. You can't just take it outside. So we have a class bank account and we have an interest rate which is 0.05 and this is a constant expression and static. So it indicates that you have the interest rate which is 0.05 and this is a fixed and this is a constant expression known at the compile time and is shared among all the accounts of type bank account. That's static. And we have a balance and then account number. So this is a constructor and it receives the account number and the balance. Now, we want to define a static function now. So let's say we have the calculate interest. So calculate interest is a function because at the end of the month, you want to compute the interest and assign that money, allocate that money or increase that money to each account. So it's not dependent on your instance, right? So it should be the class function depending on the bank account. So we have a calculate interest. So that's why we are defining it as a static and it returns float value. And its static means that it is a class function, not the object function. And it receives the account number, account object of bank account, and then we multiply the account dot balance, this balance, into with the interest rate. So interest rate is our, you can say that it's a static. So since it's a static, so we are using here the bank account class with the scope resolution operator. So anything static, we should use the class. Preferred, but you can still use the object as well. You can say this interest rate. Okay, so this is a preferred way to this because this indicates that why we have used it. Means the interest rate must be static. So immediately, if it will give you an indication that you must check that this is a static, right? And the account dot balance is something that balances the private balance of that particular account. So it returns the multiplication of these two. And in the main, we can have an account 1, which is the 123 and 1000. This is the account number, and that's the balance. Similarly, in account 2 and 456, and the balance this. So now we can compute the calculated interest on account 1. So this account is passed to this one, and this 50 should be because it's 0.05. So we multiply this, you will get the 50. Similarly, for account 2, it must be the 100. Okay, next, why do we use the constant? Restricting modifications is parameters and member variable. So in some cases, we want to restrict modifications, that there should not be any accidental or intentional modifications in parameters. Also, member variable. So there are two things. What we want is that the value that we have passed must not be changed. That's first requirement. And the second requirement is that since you are a member function, you are not allowed to, if you are not a mutator, you are not allowed to change the state of other member variable in addition to the variable that has been given to you. So these are the two things that we want in the constant to be implemented. Let's see the case of no constant. Let's say we don't have the constant keyword, right? So what happens? So we have a my class here, and this is the my string, and it's of type string. Now we have a constructor. It accepts a reference to the string. We have a get string length. It receives a string, and it will, of course, as the name indicates, it is going to return the length of that string. And this is another function. It is get member string length. So its role is not to receive a string, but the member string, which is the my string, it will check the value and it's going to return the length of that string. Okay, so we have a constructor that receives the value and assign to my string. Get string length receives a string, it returns the length of the string that has been received. So it has nothing to do with this my string. And then we have the get member string length, and it has nothing to do with what string we passed, but the whatever the value of the my string is, that must be returned. Now we have no constant keyword. So what can happen here? So you want to create an object with this string, but what happens in this function is this is replaced with the hello. Of course, there will be no error because this is a constructor, and anything can change here. And this will be replaced first, and then this replaced value is assigned to a member variable, right? So it means that you wanted to construct with some value, but actual object is created with some other value. That's one thing. Then we have a second function, which is the get string length. So it also receives a string, but this string is replaced with the hello. This function, the role of this function get string length was not to touch the member variable, because its role is to return the length of the string. But what it does is it changes the my string by hello. Second, it replaces this string also, and then it returns the length of the string, right? So it is making changes at two places. First, this is changed, and second, member variable is also changed, which is not required here. Then third, this is get member string length. It doesn't receive, but its role was that whatever the value of the member variable is, its role is to return the length of that string. But what it does is it also is changing the value of the member variable, and it returns that. After that, it returns the length of that member variable, and they are manipulating the variable, which they are not allowed, but we will receive no errors here, right? Okay, so this is where the constant comes to help us, that if we create our variable with proper constant, then if any accidental changes are there, intentional or accidental, the compiler is going to raise an error here that you can't do that. Okay, so this is what an example is here. So we have a string hello world, and we created a constructor with s1. So as you know that we have already manipulated, so you may pass hello world, but this object will be having the hello only, right? So if you call this get string length s1, so you are passing s1 here, so it's going to give 5, which is the length of the hello, not this one. Similarly, you call get a member string length, then also it will give us 5. So this is the case of no constant. Now let's see that we have the constant, and we declare the variable as our constructor like this. So my class, it has the constant. So what does it mean? That whatever the value you passed, like you passed hello world, so hello world must not be changed. So the role of the constructor is the value that it receives is assigned to my string. So this ensures that that cannot be changed, and this is only assigned to the my string. Okay, the second, the get string length. So get string length, what role was that the value it received, its role is to return the length of that. So it receives string str. First, that this should not be changed, so we declared it as a constant, right? It will not be changed. Second, earlier it was changing this one also, which was its not intention. So we are saying that your role is to manipulate this one, to do something, some operation or this one, but you should not be changing any of the our member variable. So we are declaring this constant here. So we have two constant. First constant is that this is constant. This should not be changed, and this constant indicates other member variable also should not be changed. So you are very restricted, right? And then we have get member string length, and its role is it doesn't receive anything. Its role is to return this. So we are declaring this as a constant also, that none of the member, you are an accessor only, you're not mutator. So you are accessor, you need to access the value and return it, do the operations, not manipulate that. So that's why we're declaring is constant. And now with this declaration, if you do the same, then the compiler is going to give errors here. And that's what we want, that these values should not be changed, because we have declared these as a constant here. This is also constant. So that's so the compiler will help us to find the errors here. Right, and now if we pass the hello world, so we are going to get 13, and if we pass the get string length of this one, then also we're going to get 13. Member length also 13, and this string length also 13 from both the functions. Okay, thank you.